welcome. Really super excited for today's conversation about dreaming and awakening and awakened states of consciousness with special guest and frequent visitor to the show, Stephen-Altair. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Holly. It's always a joy.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I just want to start by acknowledging the turbulent times in the world. I'm feeling a little heavy-hearted today. A friend in our community died in a mountain biking accident, and woke up to that and then sort of strange news of the world with COVID. And it's just, yeah, it's a strange time. So I just acknowledge kind of everything that's happening, and also the gift of the community to be able to have these conversations about consciousness, which have felt so important to me in my own development and growth over the past several years especially, and to be able to do these deep explorations, which I actually think, I mean, all these practices we're going to talk about today are incredibly helpful in the light of the turbulent world around us. I mean, in that sense, it couldn't be more relevant um, to um, to the external chaos that we experience as we kind of take on these bodies in this human form. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to bring on somebody like Stephen to has so much wisdom and experience, to bring his wisdom, to explore, play a little, have some experiences. Please feel free to type in your questions. I am watching as they come in, so we'll try to, if you have questions, we'll try to take them. And this topic in particular is near and dear to my heart because I have been doing a lot of my own practices in dream yoga for the past year and a half or so in a more intense way. So anyway, all of that to say, I'm very excited about this rich conversation and the ability to be here and have this space to talk about it. So thank you. Um, so to open up this conversation, I just want to kind of introduce really what we're talking about. Is we're going to talk about the practice of dream yoga and different states of consciousness. And we talk about the awake state, the sleep state, and the dreaming state as different states of consciousness, but they are all very connected, of course, because it's one consciousness. And so when we explore and dream the dreaming state, for example, we're exploring that same consciousness and in a different realm that every single night we all experience these three states. I think it's so interesting. This is so present in our everyday lives. In a sense, it's as fundamental as eating, sleeping. These states are happening every single day to every single one of us. And yet, in a sense, we actually don't really spend that much time as human beings talking about how our consciousness is going through these different states and how we can work with them to awaken as human beings, to become more awake and aware. And so that's why this is so exciting to me, is because in that sense, it is so present. It will be present in a few hours when I go to sleep, um, it's not something in that sense, we can choose to do. We do it. And then we can choose to how we want to engage with it, and whether we want to engage with that state in a more meaningful way for our spiritual growth and development and our own awakening. So there's kind of what it means to me, I guess, in my heart. And I'm really excited because Stephen has been practicing dream yoga for a very, very long time and has deep wisdom in this area. And so to be able to bring him in and have him talk about these practices, we're going to do a little bit of experiential and talk about the relationship too between these practices and the fundamental essential Buddhist concepts of emptiness, for example, and how do they all relate, and what's illusory form, and what is that, and why is that so important. So that's what we'll cover in the next hour, that we have this beautiful conversation. So with that, I guess, Stephen, I'd love to open it up to you and ask you kind of what this practice means to you on the awakening path, and where does it fit in your mind?
Sure. No, thank you, Holly, and thank you and welcome everybody, and love and blessings to you all. And I do hope that you can have a very calm day amidst the turbulence, because I really understand what you've shared at the beginning, Holly, and I particularly extend my love and prayers to the family of the person that you mentioned, because I know in my own life when tragedy has struck, that it is a time for silence and stillness and taking a little time away from everything and retreat. And so I really extend my love to that family and to yours too, because obviously you know that person closely. So I thought we could start today just by bringing to mind a beautiful thought from Zojin Ponlop, who spoke about dreaming. And what he said is that generally in our ordinary lives, we're like dreamers. We believe that this dream we're in is actually real. We actually believe it. We believe that this dream, this life that we have, that we live through identity, is real. And we think we're awake, but we're not. We think that this busy mind of all these thoughts and emotions is who we truly are. But when we actually wake up, our misunderstanding about who we are and all the suffering and confusion that brings is actually gone. So you can look at dreaming that way. In the same way, you're most of the time when you have a dream, so think of a scary dream that you had or a nightmare, when we're in the dream, we believe that it's real. And then when we wake up from that, we realize that it wasn't. It's kind of like what happens with awareness. We suddenly wake up to it. We realize that all the thoughts and emotions that we've held on to for such a long time, all these thoughts and emotions that have created the identity that we thought we were, are just an illusion. And that's the really exciting part of it, and the really exciting part of lucid dreaming, dream yoga, and illusory body yoga. So it's really very, very exciting subject indeed. And yes, I had a lot of both training and practice in this over a long, long time, ever since I was two years old, but we'll get into that shortly. So Holly, I want to pass it back to you, because this is really very much a mutual discussion about what we're sharing here about dreaming ourselves, because dreaming all of you, it's all the same thing. We're all in this together, dreaming ourselves into awakening. Holly, have you had an experience of waking up in the dream, waking up in a dream and realizing that it's a dream?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a number of them. I mean, I've had lucid dreams for my whole life. Most of them were very short. Many of them involved flying, where I realized that when I was flying that I must be dreaming because I was flying. I had one actually an experience that was so remarkable it caused me to go to a lucid dreaming workshop about a year and a half or 2 years ago. I had what I now understand is a hyperlucid dream where I was standing on a cliff and I was about to fly, and I realized, wait a minute, I can't fly. And in that moment, the world fractured into like glass, like flying out, and this like rainbow vibrant, the more real than this world I've for sure. It's so vivid, so clear, and with incredible color. I woke up and I was just like, oh my God, what was that? I was that astonishing. And then more recently, I've been practicing for a while, and I finally actually had a breakthrough about a week ago, and had a series of lucid dreams. And one of them, it felt like it felt like a long, long time. I think it may have been an hour and a half, but I was just, I was flying. I was able to I was aware that I was flying, and I was be able to test my lucidity by trying to fly through a roof, which it actually took me a few tries, which is very funny to me. Kept bumping my head, and I was like, no, I'm in a dream. Don't, I can go through this roof. which I finally did. And then, had a series of crazy wild adventures, and including one, I think I told you this, one very funny moment where I looked up on a wall and in big script letters, like Willy Wonka letters, it was the best chocolate in the world was written on the side of this building. It had some really crazy things. Um, and a moment where I looked at my hands and they were covered in green paint and I was peeling them off. And what was remarkable was the detail was so vivid. I mean, I remember looking at the lines on my hand and being so thinking it's so curious that everything was in such vivid detail. So, so there's a few experiences that were really remarkable. Yeah.
That is remarkable. That's fantastic. So do you want to share a little bit about, like, I'm sure people listening are interested. How did you do that, Holly? Do you have a method or a technique?
I was following some pretty time-tested techniques that, and so the person whose workshop I went through was Andrew Holchek, who's written this beautiful book called Dream Yoga. So if you haven't seen this book, I highly recommend it. And he has written a new book called Dreams of Light that is also really fabulous. And so he's been kind of my mentor on this path. But the techniques of called wake back to bed, so you go to sleep, you set an alarm or drink a big glass of water to wake yourself up at say 3 a.m. and then here's the key, you stay up for about 30 minutes in order to wake yourself up enough that when you go back to sleep you have a heightened state of consciousness. And so that practice combined with something called what's mild, the mnemonic induced lucid dreaming. So then when you do go back to sleep, I was replaying the dream that I wanted to get into. So taking a dream that I'd had and replaying it over and over again. And then I did a third thing. I actually did a number of things. I used galantamine, a supplement that's known to help with vividness. So I took that. And then I also was listening to some binaural beats during that 30 minutes that were associated with lucid dreaming by bliss coded sound. So I was really trying to stack the deck in my favor because it can be a hard thing to do. And to tell you, I mean, I've been trying for, over like a year and a half, like kind of working on lucid dreaming and not been very successful and been frustrated. So trying to put all these practices together, and then lots of intention practice during the day. So reality checks. So checking, I actually have wearing a watch right now so that every hour it goes off, which is a little annoying, but I'm forcing myself to do reality checks and ask myself or say, this is a dream, every hour on the hour throughout the day, and stop and be very deliberate and mindful about the environment. And so that's a whole lot of things, but
No, that's brilliant. No, that's some great insight. And before we got on live here, we were talking about some of the studies just because it interests both of us. And you mentioned about Ursula Voss. Do you want to share that? Because I think would be of particular interest to.
Sure. Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion in our community about gamma and, the role of gamma in promoting higher consciousness states. And that's been shown, right, in quite a few studies now, first by Lutz, and then there was the work out of Judd Brewer's lab, the Schoenberger study, and others. That all kind of point to that actually when you're in a lucid dreaming state, there are spikes of gamma at 40 hertz. And this one by Voss showed they had 27 participants in Germany, and they induced lucid dreaming by putting gamma on their frontal, somehow doing like volts of gamma electricity on their frontal cortex. And the participants that had that frontal gamma, had 70% of them had lucid dreams, and the ones that didn't, and then when they didn't have that, they didn't lucid dream. So there seems to be, just like in meditation, where there's some really interesting results with gamma, that is also shown in lucid dreaming, which I guess when we know what we know about meditation, it shouldn't be too surprising, but it's still really interesting science nonetheless that seems to show this connection about hyperconscious states and states of consciousness and gamma.
Mm. Oh, that's lovely. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, so that was a lot of description about my practice, and I'm curious, Stephen. So, do you want to share a little bit about some of how you got into lucid dreaming? And I know you have
Sure.
a rich dream history in your life.
Yeah, yeah. So sure, sure. Look, thank you. And I mean, as you were talking there about that Voss study, it did bring to mind the times over the last couple of years when I've used Muse to test my own lucid dreaming states, and pretty much exactly what you've said is what I discovered, that when, courtesy of the wonderful neuroscientist Kiefer O'Sullivan, who looked at my graphs, generally my graphs have shown high gamma and those deep theta spikes in all. Yeah, basically it doesn't seem to matter what I do, and that made me very curious about testing what happened when I lucid dream, because I find it easy to lucid dream. It's kind of an effortless flow, as you said, from meditation into a lucid dreaming state. So I did measure it over a number of nights, and I had one particular lucid dream of fractal states where literally when I entered the lucid dreaming state, I was very aware within the dreaming state. And I had, like Dr. Joe Dispenza describes these fractal states, and I had those. So it was it was actually a good test because I could see them very clearly within this lucid dream. And so I measured it using Muse, fortunately, and then I compared it to those studies, some of the studies that you're talking about, and my gamma on the Muse showed exactly that same sort of spike at that moment when I was experiencing those the fractal visions during the lucid dreaming state. So yeah, just in terms of support of that, I've pretty much found the same thing. And I suspect that's why it's fairly easy for me to lucid dream, because my brain is naturally exhibits those kind of that gamma theta movement or shift. And it's something that Kevin Schaininger and I in our raising our vibration discussions have talked about again and again, is the natural easefulness of being able to work with shifting from gamma to theta, from high energy states into stillness and emptiness and so on. So yeah, it does. It's great to be able to see it and support the research and say, oh, okay, I can pretty much shift into that and support what the research has found. So in terms of my own, personal experience, I guess I was quite fortunate in early childhood, because I was born into a family where my mother put me in the tender care of a Carmelite mother superior. So right from a very early age, I was brought up, understanding that the angelic forces are part of our life, and that, Jesus and Mary look after you and protect you. So I was brought up in a really strong Christian tradition with a lot of spiritual guidance from age 0. And then lo and behold, at age 2, I had this dream of being a Tibetan monk every night for 365 days. Exactly the same dream, where I died. So I can tell you, it's not particularly pleasant dying every night. And I woke up in a panic, because I was a monk with a companion walking across this chasm, falling into the chasm, and I fell into clear light and primordial sound. I can distinctly remember today the exact felt experience and what it felt, that knowing felt experience of empty clarity and light. And having that 365 days in a row, my parents were worried. They thought I was an epileptic. They took me for loads of tests. So I was a neuroscience subject from a very young age. And I mean, that's kind of all I remember. I remember basically my early life was dreaming, and the dream was, of course, much more real than everyday life, which was actually fortunate when I look back on it. And, dreaming, going to hospitals to get tests, dreaming, going to some more hospitals. And fortunately, after a year, a doctor found a way of just saying, look, he's overheated. That's what I think. So they managed to solve it for me. And it made me very curious, about this dreaming practice, because obviously as a very young fellow of just two, from age 2 to 3, and that being my first really conscious memory was actually a dream practice. The way I figure it is, because I know quite a number of my past lives, and in that particular past life, I had obviously done a lot of dream yoga practice and had triggered that dream yoga practice as you pass through the bardos or the intermediate states. I'd obviously thought to myself, I'm going to remind myself so that whatever next life I come into, I come with that memory. So that's the kind of that's the kind of view that I have of that now, is that I came into this life with that memory, and that's kind of why it came up. And it was kind of prodding me every single night. Don't forget the clear light. Don't forget the primordial sound. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget. So, you know, it was pretty useful in that context. And then, so from very early age, I recorded dreams every night. I used to dream pretty consistently, 3 dreams a night, every single night. Could remember them beginning, I mean, in excruciating detail. So I recorded about 20,000 dreams in dream journals over about a 20-year period from, oh goodness, it must have been from when I was in 7, 8 or so, right through to my late 20s. So you can easily work out the figures. It's 3 a night, 1,000 a year, and doing that for 20 years. So 20,000 is not that many, and I filled up stacks of journals and of this. And I remember, I mean, some of the dreams were just spectacular. Even now, I read the Lord of the Rings, you know, over a period of 2 weeks when I was really sick, and I dreamed the Lord of the Rings. I actually dreamed I was, you know, a rider from Rohan, and I dreamed I was up Mount, you know, on and on, like in this sequence. It was crazy for about 2 weeks nonstop. So I love doing that sort of things, and I had a lot of lucid dreams. But I never really thought, okay, well, I'm awake, and I didn't really know what lucid dreams were at that point. I just thought that was naturally kind of what happened to people in their dreams. So I remember being a star traveler on the backs of whales. So I can remember vividly being in the ocean, standing on the back of this whale, communicating with this whale, looking up at the stars, traveling up at the stars, you know. And then I had the good fortune of meeting other dreamers like me over the years. So I could actually visit, I do know how to visit other dreamers in dreams, and the kind of techniques that are involved. And they are quite involved. They're quite intimate, one would say, you know, because you actually are entering somebody else's dream space and you can communicate. So I've actually done tests with people, with witnesses, to record it, you know, doing it over a series of nights, to visit somebody in their dreams and having people witness what happened, and then doing things like, you know, dreaming cards for people and being able to pull the exact sequence of cards, all sorts of stuff like this. I don't really do that so much anymore, but it was kind of curious and, you know, fascinating when it happened. And things like healing in dreams. So I've been able to work with people in their dreams to heal them. So that's a really useful skill. And prophetic dreams, a lot of my life has changed, you know, 360 degrees because of prophetic dreams. I mean, one of the classic ones was I was trying to decide whether to go to the US or not. And I had a dream that I was on Palos Verdes beach in California, and this dolphin stood on its tail and waved to me along with a pod of dolphins. I thought, that's it, it's a sign. So I jumped on the plane, I did, and I went and stayed with some friends in Palos Verdes. And I went down the beach 3 days later, and sure enough, along came a dolphin, stood on its tail, waved at me, and with a pod of dolphins, and it was exactly the same as the dream.
Come on.
It was just so brilliant. It was like, oh, okay, the life flows through us all like that. I must have dolphin technology, you know, embedded in my brain. So yeah, so there were a lot of that. I think, you know, if you look at the types of dreams that we have, they tend to be three types. One is the typical samsaric dreams where you know, you're doing something during the day and you dream it again at night. That's a really typical dream that happens. The second type of dream is a dream of clarity, where you get some really deep insight. Maybe you have a master come and point out something to you, or you wake up and you really know something, or and sometimes lucid dreams can fall in that category too. And the other is clear light dreams, where you literally are enlightening within the dream. It's almost like a dream practice. So quite a lot of times I've found myself meditating in dreams. I do the majority of my dreams these days seem to be centered around meditation. So I either find myself meditating or being instructed by I've had the most wonderful, transmissions, initiations, and pointing outs from masters in dream. Everybody from the Dalai Lama to Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche to Mingyur Rinpoche to Padmasambhava to Yeshe Tsogyal to Princess Mandarava. I to the Karmapas. I've had the first, seventh Karmapa point out things to me in my dream. Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche is a very famous Rinpoche from quite some time back, the fifth Dalai Lama. So quite a lot of times I've had pointing outs from particular masters. Yogananda, of course, Christ, definitely. Some of them are very real. Like on just a few occasions, I've had masters appear in the room. And so when I I'll dream, I open my eyes and they're also there. So, but that's rare, but it has happened. And they've usually been at very significant turning points in my life. And, it's been a very great help and assistance along the path. So look, I do thoroughly advise people to practice lucid dreaming, because it's, as you said, there is, in the traditions, there is no difference. It's all awareness, right? It's all I am that consciousness. There's not a difference between waking, and then there's this little section of life called meditation, and then there's this section where we go to sleep. There is actually, it's all one awareness. And as we start to break down those boundaries of the identity, we also find that we break down the boundaries of these stages that we've kind of divided our life, working life. This is family time. This is, we start to break all that down, which is where, coming back to your point about meditation, which is why meditation itself is so crucial. Because in fact, you mentioned your techniques. My simplest technique is basically, because I practiced a lot of deity yoga. Originally, I started a lot of deity yoga with the Dalai Lama. So I've studied with the Dalai Lama a long, long time now, more than 30 years. And so I've also studied personally with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche. I'm on a retreat, it's called a Dzogchen immersion retreat with Mingyur Rinpoche at the moment, which is really, really insightful, because he brings up a lot of these kinds of practices. And he speaks about how, as you advance in your practices, it gets simpler and simpler. And it's the same with meditation. These days, if I sit to meditate and rise from meditation and eat my breakfast, it doesn't feel any different. The same felt awareness, pure awareness, is there all the time. When I'm speaking to you now, this room is filled with pure what you are, the walls are, the trees are, the sky is. There's no difference. And that is the whole essence of really dream yoga practices, that you start to bring your meditative practices into your sleep time. So there's a lot of times, if I really practice it, I kind of don't really sleep, but I rest, and you wake very rejuvenated. So that's more a sleep yoga practice. But essentially what I do is before I go to sleep, I have a very subdued meditation practice, which sometimes involves lying down, sometimes sitting, sometimes I just don't do it at all, because I'm already in that naturally kind of beautiful, compassionate state. It feels like things actually have a taste, they feel like a flow of compassion in every moment. So this room feels like it's a compassionate room. It doesn't feel like it's separate from me. And then when I go to sleep, I read something from Yogananda, read something from Saint Teresa of Lisieux, and I read some old Dzogchen texts. So I kind of immerse my consciousness in these really beautiful, essentially they're instructions, right? They're kind of just giving you a consciousness, just saying, hey, just shift this way, shift. Then I lie down. Usually I'm with my daughter, read her a few. So I read these texts to her, and then I have to read Cinderella or whatever other one. It's usually Cinderella, Belle, or Ariel. She's really into Disney princesses at the moment, but that's okay. Look, Zodian, Disney princesses, it's all the same awareness when you look at it. It's all about beauty. It's all about compassion. It's all about awareness and realization. So read that. She kind of cuddles in tight. Then she quite often asks for recording, because she's grown up with this habit of going to sleep with either 10-10, that's Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, or Min Min, that's Mingyur Rinpoche, the funny man, she calls him, or Dalai, that's the Dalai Lama. So we put on, I just got my phone, I just put on something, and quite often they're sleep yoga instructions, so I choose those kinds of things and play them, and we go off to sleep. Now, when I go off to sleep, I'm either lying on my back, but it's recommended that you lie on your side. And then my practice for years and years has been Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig or Guanyin, and some, if you're in the Chinese philosophy, or in Japan, she's called Kanon Sama. So he or she, this goddess or mother of compassion, I bring her into my heart. So if you're practicing this, bring whatever the object of your devotion is into your heart. And then I basically go into a meditative space as I'm going to sleep. So I'm literally in that clear light. It's just now clear light, to explain, is really empty clarity or empty knowingness. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to sleep in a visually light-filled space. It can be. I'm extremely visual, but it more means that there's this, your identity's dropped away. There is just this space of clarity. So you drop off to sleep in really what is a meditative space of awareness. And as you go into sleep, so typically what happens to me is I sleep and I'm aware, this may sound strange to some listeners, but I'm actually aware I'm asleep, and it's almost like I'm slightly out of body. And then into that space of awareness comes visions, and they're pretty dramatic, they're very clear. And as you've mentioned with your lucid dreaming, the visions are clearer than this. I mean, it's like they're so vivid in color. And that's one thing I often recommend people to do if they want to get into lucid dreaming before they go to sleep is, brighten your awareness so that you start to, brighten your sight, brighten your hearing, brighten your touch, taste, feeling. So, because in the lucid dream, it's actually very much like that. Your senses are accentuated a millionfold. And so I've had the most bizarre lucid dreaming experiences, for example, like where I'm a dragonfly, and I'll talk about this later because it's kind of a very interesting experience in terms of science. But the colors and the sensations and so on are extremely vivid. So speaking of science, I wanted to pass back to you. So what about, I mean, Holly, you're a wonderful research scientist, and I'm truly in awe of all your abilities there. So, that's enough about me and how I get into. So fundamentally, lying on your right-hand side, bringing an object of devotion to your heart, going into a really simple, clear meditative space. So you're leaving aside all the thoughts of the day, drop off your identity, lie quiet, still, let yourself, be in that space. So, and you did mention about, heavy sleeping versus light sleeping. I'm definitely a light sleeper, courtesy of my mom. Thank you, Mom. So I can, exist in that very light phase where I remember my dreams pretty naturally all through the night. I mean, sometimes I can remember 20 dreams over a night time easily if I actually want it. And so I do write them down, so keep a pen and paper handy. Do drink a little bit of water beforehand. It does actually help you to kind of makes your body actually remember to wake up at certain times because you need to go for pee or whatever. So there is that assistance. But definitely if you've practiced a lot of meditation and you go to sleep like that in a space of really deep devotion. So I always ask the Mother of Compassion, because she's present with me all the time, help me lucid dream, Yeah. I used to. I don't do that because it's automatically, there's kind of like a bond that you have with awareness. It's a bit like meditation. People don't usually, when they're advanced meditators, they don't sit down and say, help me to meditate, because they're kind of almost always in that state. And it's a bit like that with lucid dreaming. I've had lucid dreaming states during the day, conversely having worlds awaken in my vision while I'm aware of this three-dimensional reality. I'm aware of another parallel reality simultaneously. So that happens too in the waking state. So onto the science. So I'm curious, because you've got such a depth, and you've done a lot of research, and you're also aware, having done a lot of workshops like myself in dream yoga. What's the science? What could you tell people about the science behind dream yoga, and because we're going to lead into it, emptiness as well?
Sure. And first, before I go into that, I guess I just want to respond a little bit to say, I do agree with you so much on the state of mind when you go to sleep. And so, I didn't mention this when I was talking, but I definitely set strong intentions. So as I'm falling asleep, I'm sort of, asking for support in lucid dreaming, and also sort of saying to myself, may I have a lucid dream, or something like that I'm repeating over and over again. And I have found too, and most recently in these profound dreams that I had this last week, that what you were saying about being in a meditative state, and I've now read this in a number of places, so being in a meditative state as you're falling asleep is really super key. So, you're trying to, what I noticed was that I would come into that meditative presence of being just extremely aware of the present moment and where I was, and I would just essentially, like, you're meditating as you're falling asleep. For people who are practice meditators, and that, that's the benefit of meditating a lot, is you understand what that state feels like. It's pretty natural now. And so I just bring that state into my dreaming state. Yeah. And, and then lying on the side, like you said, and, I've done some other practices, like in the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, of bringing, an ah symbol to your throat and things like that, as well. I'm going to say I've experimented with them. Definitely not something I always do. But to get into a little bit about the science. So I mentioned the Voss study, and I mentioned this link with hyperconscious states, which is, so important. But this other aspect of the illusory nature of reality, and kind of trying to start to blur the lines between waking and dreaming and sleeping. And fundamental to that, in, as I've come to understand it, and in my own, experience, is that as we start to touch the empty nature of reality, as we start to really feel awareness and see this ever-present empty and full awareness that is the ground of our being, then this external world, with all the arisings and passings that are happening all the time, you see them that way, and the solidity of the external world starts to break down, is what it feels like. And I think what's so interesting about that is that when you look at some of the quantum physics science, like what David Bohm was, exploring so richly in his work, and his, that beautiful film, Infinite Potential, and his conversations with Krishnamurti, and talking about the hollowness and emptiness of thought and emotion. And, and really he talks about what he was sort of saying is the fundamental interconnectedness and wholeness of everything. And that our individuality comes from that wholeness. He had this beautiful quote: individuality is only possible if it unfolds from wholeness. So rather than the sort of separate nature of reality, that it feels like everything is separate, if we understand the wholeness of everything fundamentally, and then that individuality drops away, and And I think what's then also very interesting is this aspect of the illusion of solidity in terms of the emptiness of things. So science, for example, says that 99.99999% of everything we see is actually space. So it looks and appears solid, but actually it's space. And a great visual on that, I have two great visuals to share. One is I read recently that if you took all the space out of all the atoms of every human being on the planet, they would fit in the size of a sugar cube.
That's brilliant. That is, I like that
So
visual a lot.
brilliant, right?
I'm gonna remember that anytime I come near a sugar cube.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
that just
lovely.
kind of blows your mind apart. If to me, that just blows my mind apart, right? So that everything we're looking at is actually mostly space, truly. It feels impossible because everything looks so dang solid, right? And then I was reading about this and trying to understand, well, why does everything look so solid? And one description of it that I read felt to me like it landed. It was like, well, it's like when you look at a fan that is in motion. When the fan is stopped, you can see all the space in between a fan, but when it's in motion, it looks like a solid thing. So all the electrons are bouncing around, and essentially all their movement is creating the illusion of the solidity, um, just because of the motion. So if everything stopped, then we would all of a sudden see the spaciousness or emptiness of nature. So yeah, so that it may feel like it's not related, but it's so related because of understanding when we start to break down the illusory nature of reality and moving into the dream space and working there is what when you start to blur these lines, to me, I first experienced it in meditation, but then now as the dream world comes alive, and it's like the dream world, I'm waking up in the dream world and it's coming to match the experiences of the waking world, and now they don't seem so separate anymore. Is how I guess how I experience it. Yeah, so um, I know you have a lot to say about emptiness.
Yeah, we could
Right.
definitely dive in right there for sure. Um, I so just to tag on to your science aspect and then to dive into emptiness. So we'll do a brief emptiness example. It's actually one I love that Muji uses a lot and that I've heard used a lot. Sadhguru uses it, Mingyur Rinpoche uses it. The same, diving into it, Dan Brown uses it to try to find where identity is. So I'll do that in a moment. But just to tag on to the illusion of form, and it's particularly the illusion of past. What you talked about, the illusion of space and solidity, about and also about past, future, and the seeming permanence and stability of things. I've loved the night sky since I was a kid, and since I was very little. And I always used to sit up there and gaze at the stars and think about the fact that we were only ever seeing the past. Because when you think about let's say we're not seeing the present, because a lot of the whatever hundreds of billions of stars in this whole known universe, many of the ones that we're looking at don't exist, right? Because the star that's furthest at the edge of this known universe, which is about 14 billion light years away, then you've got to wait 14 billion light years to see what it's actually really up to. I always felt so curious, thinking, oh my goodness, I am looking at the sky, but I'm not actually seeing the present. And when you think of it that way, you start to think about your brain. And this is where lucid dreaming comes in, because you start to realize the illusion of form, the illusion of stability, the illusion of past and future. The brain itself, I mean, you've mentioned about the way the brain, about the fan visual. I think that's a beautiful one, because basically, the brain is reducing 11 million bits of sensation to something like 10 to 50 bits of consciousness. So it's a pretty poor map. right? I mean, what we perceive, as you say, we don't perceive the space. We just perceive the 10 to 50 bits of consciousness that our brain is sending to us. And so it's no wonder people feel something's missing in their life. There's a whole bunch of whatever the other many millions of bits of information that are kind of not being used. So this is awareness saying to you, hey, wake up, look, wake up to it. And this is the advantage of actually really waking up to a dream state. Because when you do it, and I mean, you've experienced that, it's really quite moving. I know Andrew Holacek describes on his seminars, you know, that when people have a lucid dream for the first time in their life, they're in tears because it's just such a moving realization. And then you realize, oh, I can transfer that ability into this waking life and wake up to what I'm perceiving as being real. And when I perceive my thoughts and emotions as being real, then I don't need to hang on to them for so long. Right. So, you know, I mentioned having a lucid dream, for example. The lucid dreams also can be incredibly wise and point out. So I've had just the most remarkable lucid dreams, but just one I was going to mention was when I had a lucid dream of being a dragonfly. As you probably know, we've got trichromatic vision. So we have, you know, reds, blues, and greens predominantly. And so these three different types of light sensitive proteins in the eye give us that trichromatic vision. But dragonflies, as opposed to 3, can have 30, and they can actually see ultraviolet on top of the red, blue, green. So that's what happened in my lucid dream. I could see 360 degrees, and I could see the ultraviolet frequency as well as perceive all the different. So the colors were like, they were just like nothing on earth. I'd never experienced anything of it. And when you think about it, you know, our photoreceptor cells are actually only responding to, you know, 0. I don't know what it is, about 13.01% of what actually is out there. So we filter out, we're totally clueless when it comes to, you know, radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma rays, infrared rays, and ultraviolet rays. So we don't pick up any of that. So think about that. You know, when you think about that, we're filtering out, or we're just not even responding to an enormous amount of the universe that actually exists that we don't pick up. And it's the same, you know, I love that example, that visual you gave of space. I've always, when I was very little, I always used to think about the fact that I was breathing in Christ or breathing in the Buddha, because effectively we take about 23,000 breaths a day. And of those, 100 with 23 zeros after, or 1 with 23 zeros after it, atoms in every single breath are inhaled and exhaled. So there's this staggering amount of, you know, atoms that we breathe in, 1 with 23 zeros after it, that many. So we're literally breathing in atoms from, you know, I'm breathing atoms from you, even though I'm on the other side of the world. I'm breathing in atoms from everybody who's listening. So I love that as an analogy. And
great statistic.
It's a great
Yeah.
It's a great visual of breathing, and I often feel that whenever I'm thinking about, say, some of the tantra practices that I did with the Dalai Lama and the color chakra. And if any of you ever want to do a really profound practice, I did it over 13 days. It's a very long and deep practice, and it goes deeply into emptiness, since we're talking about emptiness shortly. And the part of that practice is that you do a very profound practice called deity yoga. And in deity yoga, it's basically like that. You are breathing in the essence of the Lama, you're breathing in the essence of the deity, whoever it is. And the Dalai Lama is very free. I love the Dalai Lama for the fact that he, you know, he will say to you quite openly, look, no matter what tradition you come from, the majority of the practices surround the color chakra deity, but you can replace that with whatever tradition you come from. So there's, you know, I worked with the Mother of Compassion right throughout the time, and it was so profound. You literally feel that you are breathing in those, you know, zillions of atoms of the Mother of Compassion, because there's this felt experience of the awareness in the breath as you're doing that. So anyway, there's just a whole lot of things about the illusion of you know, the illusion of permanence, the illusion of space, the illusion of solidity, and the illusion of past and present. But the other one that I do really love was the thought that, you know, I'd always been a great Star Wars and Star Trek fan. I'd always wanted to travel through space. And as some of my good physics friends, because I had planned to be an astrophysicist rather than get into any, that was one of my plans at high school. And so I was always intrigued with the, you know, nature of movement in space. And as any scientist will say, we are basically space travelers, because Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and it's hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. So we're already in motion. There is not really any stability. And the sun itself is screaming through the Milky Way at, you know, 500,000 miles per hour. And that, the Milky Way itself, is hurtling along at 1.5 million miles an hour. So we are literally space travelers, and space stability is, as you were pointing out about space, is fundamentally an illusion.
Right.
So
And actually, it feels to me
yeah,
so it's such an important concept to grasp, because when we can put life into that context of the fundamental instability or the fundamental impermanence and be super comfortable with that, then it's like, well, what do we have left, right? And what we have left is the stability of our presence, of our aware presence or our consciousness. That's the one
exactly.
thing that doesn't change.
Oh, so
And
you're
yeah, I mean, I just want to throw in, because for me, the impermanence has always been around time. Like, I just have this thing about time. It just, ever since I was little, I kind of can't get over the fact that it's always the present moment. Like, the past feels so, I mean, 5 minutes ago, 2 minutes ago feels like a dream, like an illusion, and the future is dream like an illusion. It's so, and that, I don't know why, but that lands for me in a really odd way. I remember doing this experiment when I was 10 years old where I was like, can I do this where I never forget this moment? Like, I marked it in my head, and it felt like as I got away from that moment, like I was a car moving away from a moment. And it was the weirdest thing. And I kept checking back, like, oh, now it's been days, now it's been months, now it's been years. And my whole life, I never forgot that one moment. And I don't know why that felt so significant, but it just was like just getting really comfortable with impermanence somehow through time and timelessness. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that is kind of a perfect segue into doing an emptiness or impermanence practice. So, for those of you, if you've come across emptiness before, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that your identity is going to vanish. It's going to drop away. The part of you that we kind of attach so much emphasis to, this narrative self with all its inner chatter and this kind of belief system where we think our thoughts and feelings, perceptions are who we are, that in a few moments is going to disappear. So I'll give you a couple of really swift pointing outs. There's one, those of you who are Dan Brown fans, you'll be familiar with this and pointing out the great way. And those of you who are Muji fans will be familiar with isness. So I'll weave an understanding of that. So if you're driving, please stop, because when you're empty, you will not be able to drive. You'll be in that, if you're coming to it suddenly, it sometimes comes as such a shock. If you have worked with emptiness for a while, there is certainly an ability to maintain some kind of simultaneous awareness or merging of awareness. But when you're just starting and somebody points out to you that the nature of your identitylessness, suchness, it can be really quite, can be incredibly overturning. It's like your world is suddenly flipped upside down. So anyway, if you're listening and you're driving, please stop and enjoy a park somewhere. And if you're not driving, then just simply with me, make sure you got a nice seat, that your posture is comfortable and that you're feeling very relaxed, and simply close your eyes. For just a moment, feel your feet flat on the floor and feel your palms resting in your lap or wherever they are. Make sure your spine's straight. It's like there's a string pulling you up to the ceiling. And we're going to dive into emptiness. Now, one way of doing this is through simple non-conceptual awareness. So you could bring to mind your personal identity. And since I'm doing this with Holly, I'm going to use holiness. So you could evoke your sense of self just for a moment and look at any personality characteristics that you associate with yourself, so that you familiarize yourself with this target of holiness, or whoever you are listening, and take your high-speed awareness that's faster than thought and roam through the regions of the body and see if you can find Holly anywhere, or your own identity anywhere. See if you can actively search and locate it. And the more you search, the more it is unfindable, that there's this emptiness. So there's an unfindability of the target. And if you think there's any basis for the identity, look a bit further. If you think it's in your head, have a look there. See if you can find it in the brain. And if you can't find it in the brain, then look in the cells and in the molecules until that's unfindable too. And then you will notice a shift. And you find you're operating more out of awareness. So it's no longer obstructed by any idea or boundary. So the awareness is the basis of your operation. So evoke this sense of self again, this sense of personal identity. Familiarize yourself with that identity again, any characteristics you associate with it. Take your awareness and roam through the mental content. Can you find anything specific? Any specific content? Any thoughts, emotions? Any specific ones? What about sights or sounds or perceptions? Whatever arises in your mind, is it independent? You'll find as the more you actively search, the more this independence recedes. This identity starts to vanish and dissolve altogether. It recedes from your awareness as an unfindable. As you continue to search, there's a shift again. Now what remains is awareness, free of obstacles, free of any obscurations, not obscured by any construction or cloud of the self. So you're operating from awareness, and it's gone beyond any personal identity. So now with awareness itself, go back to that identity, the object, with awareness, totally guiding the meditation. The self is out of the way. Awareness is doing the meditation. Awareness has gone beyond thought. It's gone beyond any self. So in this awareness, just take simple, calm breaths. Letting go and relaxing totally into this deep ease and allowing whatever happens around you simply to be here as it is. You don't need to change anything, improve anything, just sitting here empty. Empty, empty. There's no past, no future, no idea of who you want to be. Nothing. You're leaving all imagination aside, all visualization, just simply bringing attention here and now. Totally empty. You're not engaging with thought. or feeling or memory, just empty, empty, empty. No new concepts, just as you are right now. Place empty of concepts. Everything left outside, everything left aside. You're just totally empty, empty, empty. So empty that there's nothing left to leave, no attachment to a feeling of I, no clinging, no grasping to any self or any identity. Simply just here, in this space. And you know that you exist, empty of these concepts, just empty. This feeling of pure awareness, vast, formless awareness, effortless presence. You're allowing whatever is happening to happen and being fully present. Being fully present. Being fully aware, awake and aware. Empty, empty, empty. Every thought, every feeling, every perception is pure, empty, aware. And in this moment, your meditation is infused and saturated with this awareness, this quality of presence, being fully present. Present in compassion for all beings. This emptiness, this clarity of being. You feel the light, the nectar of presence arising in your heart. As you rest here, without trying to meditate, if thoughts come, let them come. Be effortless, present and aware as a thought arises from this empty, clear presence. It's always here. It's never born, never dies. Effortless. You're not trying to make anything happen, just simply resting in open awareness. Allowing it to happen. Pure consciousness, turiya, unborn awareness, life and truth and holiness flowing through you. It's the self of the Buddha, the Christ consciousness, the living and imperishable truth inside the heart of every being. Before the beginning, you are this, and throughout all time, you are this. And after all endings, you are this. I am that. Awareness, pure awareness. And your true nature revealing itself inside your heart. Nowhere to go, just this one moment. Be there. Resting in open awareness in the pure grace of your heart, timeless, empty, clarity. Now in this awareness, gently open your eyes. Dedicate any merits from this practice to all beings, that they too can recognize their own empty clarity, luminous, compassionate awareness. And bring this effortless, natural presence, pure awareness into your life. Thank you for your practice, and thank you, Holly. So,
thank you for that journey into emptiness. That was sublime. Yeah, those I've been doing, a number of practices into emptiness, and both, Dan Brown and with Muji, and I really, the more I do those practices of really coming to the ground of feeling the solidity of the ever-changing, the non-changing nature of that empty being and the fullness of it, it just it really has the power to change your relationship to all this movement that's going on and sort of putting it all into perspective. Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I
Yeah.
think that's, the changing our perspective is one of the big key shifts into pure awareness. So I absolutely agree. I mean, to put all of this in context, the
Yeah.
dream yoga and the kind of yoga practice of illusory form and clear light practices actually arose from a series of practices called the 6 yogas of Naropa. So a series of practices I did some years ago. The 6 practices are fundamentally, for those of you that are Tumo fans, the first practice is the yoga of the inner heat or the mystic heat. So that's number 1. Second practice is the yoga of clear light. So the practice of radiance and luminosity. And then the third practice is the yoga of the dream state or the yoga of sleep and dream. So that's the one that a lot of the lucid dreaming practices have come out of, this one particular practice. And then there's the yoga of the illusory body, which we've partly connected with here too, which is really, these are all integral practices. You quite often find that, by doing tumo, it will speed up it does activate that gamma state, and it does speed up your progress into, lucid dreaming and waking up in your everyday waking state. And then the yoga of the intermediate state and the yoga of transference to fields of consciousness. So when you can transfer consciousness to a pure Buddha field, for example. So there are these 6 yogas of Naropa, and traditionally when you practice those particular yogas, you'll go through a 4-stage sequence, which is in most of the insight practices. So whether it's in Zojin, Mahamudra, Madhyamaka, or whichever of for example, the Tibetan practices you do. So I studied with the Dalai Lama in Madhyamaka and with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche doing Bon Zojin, and also with Sogyal Rinpoche doing traditional Zojin, and with Mingyur Rinpoche doing Mahamudra. And the format is basically the same. You engage in preliminaries first, where you build a vessel, and you build a vessel through your intent, like you were saying about your intention prior to dreaming, your motivation, your attitudes, your cognitive awareness, your behaviors, your visualization practices. So you set a very strong intention, and you practice bodhicitta, a little bit like we did here, dedicating your practice for all living beings in Guru Yoga, and work a lot on posture and all the preparatory activities. So that's one. And then so you do that in dream yoga too. As part of that, I'm outlining this just purely to give you a framework that you might enter into if you were to do a dream yoga workshop, which is a little plan Holly and I are going to present later on this year as a dream yoga workshop along these lines. So the first is preliminaries, the second is concentration, where you build your ability to stay on a particular state, stay on the breath, for example, and to build stability and absorb and then let go. And then you let go into emptiness. So letting go of the identity and entering what's called insight practices. So that's the third stage, insight, emptiness, or suchness, or openness. There's lots of different ways of describing it, where instead of solidifying the self, which kind of makes things seem substantial and unchanging and preventing us from seeing things as they are, we cultivate seeing beyond and empty clarity and luminous awareness and blissful and compassionate awareness. And that leads you into the fourth aspect of it, which is compassionate awareness, which is that vast ocean of ever-present awakefulness and awareness and unconditional love, where the true nature of the mind is empty, free of identity, compassionate, truly knowing awareness, which is the clarity, and overall just a wish to benefit all sentient beings and to free them from suffering. So those 4, the preliminaries, the concentration, the insight or emptiness practice, and the compassionate practice are fundamentally how you would engage in a dream yoga workshop or in dream yoga practice.
And those, just to clarify for people, those are waking daytime illusory body practices.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. For
So
most people.
for most people, yeah, yeah. They and
Understanding at the advanced level, you would actually be able to do those in a dream
in,
state.
correct. That's what I was going to say. Is there's actually no separation. You know what I found in the dream state is that I can dream into a state of emptiness or absorption, and you actually I found myself many times practicing the actual practices in the dream state. So it's wondrous. It's like you're actually in the dream state, awake, but aware that you're dreaming meditation. And so that's kind of what the masters are guiding you towards, is to see the seamless integration of all the states, that there's not really, ultimately there's no separation there. And going back to what we said right at the beginning, that how important your meditation practice is, because it basically guides you. And then you're meditating during your day, you are present and aware when you're eating, you're present and aware in every moment of your life, you're present and aware as you go to sleep, and you're present and aware in all your dreams and in your sleep state.
Yeah. I think I'm aware of time, and I
Yes.
actually think that coming full circle is a beautiful place to end it. This is a really rich and conversation and could go on for hours. And like you said, we actually are working right now on putting together a dream yoga workshop seminar series to offer later on in the year. So we'll have some time to explore with people who want to go deeper with Stephen and I in these practices and build a community of practice around these practices. But yeah, I love that for full circle.
Yeah, I was aware of the time too. So I just thought, I can hear Holly tapping in my consciousness. I thought I'll just tag the beginning onto the end, since there is no beginning and no end, right? So
Yes,
it's
no beginning and no
it
end.
is really, when you think fundamentally about it, it's pretty exciting. When there's no beginning and no end, that means fundamentally there's no difference between Holly and I, guru consciousness, the trees, the sky. We are all literally oneness, or as Andrew Holichek says, noneness.
Yes, we are none, and our individuality unfolds from wholeness, as David
Yeah,
Bohm so
yeah,
beautifully said. But,
exactly.
our conceptual mind that wants to wrap around these ideas gets rung around the axle pretty quickly. And I do think, like your point about bringing in the experience, it's really only when you start to experience that wholeness in, I think, meditation, at least for me, that's where things that I'd read about for a while actually started to make sense, if it were. It started to, my conceptual mind doesn't understand it, but my knowing mind feels it.
Exactly, exactly. So just to finish up, there are lots of places. If you don't know Holly and I well, there's lots of places you can find us. You can find us at the Heart Mind Alchemy Project, obviously on Facebook. You can find Holly and I at Awaken Unbound on Holly's the heartmindalchemy.com. Right? You can find Holly and I and many other wonderful meditators with Kevin Shaninger on raisingourvibration.net. And you can find Holly and I and lots of very enlightened awareness practitioners at theconsciousaccelerator.com with Constantine. So we have got a lot of different, of course, Kiefer, who's very much part of this too, and who brings so much of his adept neuroscience background to these practices, and also into your daily life and understanding your graphs. Kiefer is certainly a person to go to for insight and guidance in that. So, and you can find him at
Ponderbrain.com.
ponderbrain.com.
So,
All right.
thank you for covering all that. That's perfect. Great. You did my job for me. I usually have to say all that. And thank you for co-hosting and doing that. And yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate everybody who's been here in the community watching us. I saw some good friends that are on, Bill Turner and Kiefer and Daniel, my friend Jennifer, Randy, Kim. Thank you all who are commenting and watching. Feels
And
wonderful.
thank you. I know in the Raising a Vibration, there is a wonderful core group of people, because you mentioned Bill and Randy and many others who are part of that. So a special shout out to all of you. I think in this day and time that we're in at the moment, the support of your community and the support of the people that you've gathered around you are so crucial at this time. We all feel at different times anxieties, fears, troubles, feel the suffering of the world on our shoulders. And, indeed, some of the leaders on our planet are suffering right at this moment. So our hearts and prayers go out to everybody, just as your family and friends have found. There is a lot of concern about stability and where is it. And so for that, definitely I encourage you to reach out to our community of people, of many of whom are listening and who are such wonderfully brave and wise souls. So thank you indeed for everybody that's listening and for the love that you share with all of us. So thank you. I'm inspired by every single person.
Yes, indeed. And that's so beautifully said. So thank you for saying that as well. And love to everybody. And yeah, thank you for being here. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Lots of love to you all.